Greetings, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers. Well, our look at Deep Space Nine Season 2 now continues on with the episode Crossover. As Major Kira and Dr. Bashir make their way back to Deep Space Nine, Kira asks Bashir to take over the helm control of the runabout USS Rio Grande, as she has a headache and would like to meditate. Bashir mentions that he once had the opportunity to study with a rhythmic breathing expert named Assam Halewa, but Kira seems rather less than interested. When he mentions that he would like to learn any Bajoran techniques, Kira tells him that Bajorans usually just sit quietly. There is a brief pause as Kira meditates before Bashir begins breathing spastically. She looks up, irritated, asking him what he is doing. He explains that he is using a technique called Bella's breath meant to increase one's energy flow. In an attempt to change the subject, Kira suggests that they listen to some music. An undaunted Bashir asks what type the Major prefers, but unfortunately her musical knowledge is limited to Bajoran composers. He immediately tells the computer to play a selection by Tor Jalan, one of Bajor's greatest composers, much to Kira's surprise. She wonders how he knows of Tor, and he explains that he has made a point to listen to Bajoran music ever since he was assigned to DS9. They seem on the verge of finding common ground when he starts comparing Tor to the great Baldaric masters of the previous century, which seems to further annoy Kira. He remains as gung-ho as ever, attempting to get to know Kira on a first-name basis. Bashir goes on to say that Nerys is one of the most interesting women he has ever met, and he is glad they are putting their past conflicts behind them. Kira sarcastically adds that they are making room for new ones. Laughing, Bashir relates that he and Chief O'Brien were once at odds with one another, but now he claims that they are like this as he crosses his fingers. He presses on, trying too hard as usual, and tries to get Kira to call him Julian instead of Bashir. However, when he attempts to hit on her, she tells him to stick with Dax instead. This finally silences the Doctor. As the runabout drops out of warp, the warp field does not collapse properly and they are engulfed in a white flash upon entering the wormhole. In the wormhole, both Kira and Bashir feel dizzy, as Kirk and crew did in the original transporter incident. When they exit the Bajoran wormhole in the Alpha Quadrant, they shock to see the station is gone, instead orbiting Bajor much as it did during the occupation. Before either of them can react, the runabout sensors detect a Klingon Vorcha class attack cruiser moving towards them. The two officers beam aboard the runabout and are shocked to see Kira. Apologizing profusely, they offer to escort her back to the station. She simply nods, obviously confused. Upon arriving at Terek Nor, the two Klingon officers confer with a Cardassian officer named Garrick. Bashir and Kira board the station, where they're confused to see Garrick and even more confused to see another Kira Nerys, dressed entirely in black. Oh boy. Bashir politely asks where they are and Garrick informs him that they are aboard Terek Nor, the center of authority in the Bajoran sector for something simply referred to as the Alliance. Kira observes that she and Bashir took a wrong turn in the wormhole, suggesting they return to their runabout. However, the other Kira, whom the Klingons and Garrick address as intended, seems to have other plans. Bashir attempts to intervene, only to be vociferously chastised as a Terran for his tone of voice. The attendant believes she has an idea of who their visitors are, and if she is right, she tells Kira she cannot let them go. Dismissively, she orders one of the Klingons to put Bashir to work and reminds them to tell the supervisor to keep an eye on him, as the Doctor is unaware of their rules. Garrick and the remaining Klingon escort Kira as they follow the intendant out the airlock area and onto an identical version of the promenade. Large flags display what appears to be the winged version of the Cardassian emblem enveloping the Klingon emblem, and below the flags, exhausted humans carry large pieces of machinery and service to the Klingons and Cardassians. A Klingon officer named Telek informs the attendant that a Terran has been discovered attempting to stow away aboard a freighter and brings the man to her. Approaching the Terran, the attendant takes on a compassionate tone, asking his designation. She is dismayed to hear he is a Theta and observes how long and hard he worked to earn this designation. Her tone changes to business as she tells Garrick to send the Terran to the mines. Garrick wants to execute the Terran to make an example of the man, but the attendant claims Garrick has made a career out of setting examples. He presses the issue, pointing out that two other Terrans have been caught trying to escape and asking that he be allowed to conduct an interrogation at least. When the attendant permits this, she warns Garrick not to kill his prisoner. Elsewhere on the station, An ore processing section identical to the one on DS9 houses dozens of humans who perform the same slave-like roles their Bajoran counterparts once did in the normal universe. As the Bajor is escorted to the processing area, Miles O'Brien warns Odo that they need to upgrade one of the machine's thorium containment cells or there will be an accident. O'Brien stresses to Odo that he will not be held responsible for the resulting consequences. The Klingon escorting Bashir brings him to Odo and informs Odo that Bashir does not know the rules. Odo asks Bashir for his designation. Bashir can only think of his name, which Odo interprets as a joke. As a result, Odo brutally slaps him. Again, Odo asks for a designation, so Bashir informs Odo he does not have one. Odo corrects him, adding "sir" to the end of the statement. A rhetorical response garners another slap. Bashir becomes visibly enraged as they talk, but it's apparent that Odo takes perverse pleasure in provoking him. Upon hearing that Bashir is a doctor, Odo sarcastically reminds him to scrub before he operates. Bashir is put to work, but notices that O'Brien has observed the exchange with great interest. Leading Kira and the guard escorting her to Ops, the attendant passes several Alliance emblems before entering the office normally occupied by Benjamin Sisko. She sits and urges Kira to do the same, dismissing the guard, who is feasting on Kira like an excited child on Christmas. The attendant reveals to Kira that almost a century ago, a human named James T. Kirk accidentally traded places with his Mirror Universe Terran counterpart and drastically altered the course of history on this side. At the time of the switch, the Terran Empire was barbaric but strong. While in the Mirror Universe, Kirk met a Vulcan named Spock and had what the attendant calls a profound influence on him. Spock preached peaceful reforms after R. Kirk left, rising to the commander-in-chief of the Empire in the process of doing so. However, once he had completed his reforms, the Empire was too weak to defend itself from the newly formed Klingon-Cardassian alliance. Kira wonders how Bajor fits into the picture. The attendant explains that the planet had been occupied by the Terrans for decades when the Empire fell. Upon becoming free, a petition for entry into the alliance and became quite an influential member in later years. Her story finished, the attendant wonders if the other side is similar at all. Unfortunately, Kira informs the attendant that her Bajor has not been so fortunate. The attendant is eager to hear about life in Kira's universe, but Kira says that she cannot stay. However, the attendant does not know how to send her back, nor could she if she wanted to do so. The Alliance, upon seizing power, declared that any visitors from other universes must be killed immediately to prevent future incursions after the first crossover. But, unlike Eric, she says she does not like using violence. Kira knows exactly what she means, and that she is looking for an excuse not to kill our Kira. Kira solicits the attendant's help, as she feels a leader like the attendant could teach her what she needs to know to bring about a stronger Bajor in her universe. My side would change the course of your history, she says. Well, maybe your side can change mine. While the idea appeals to the attendant, she says she will have to kill Bashir. When Kira asks her not to, she says letting him live is too dangerous and the Klingons and Cardassians will not allow it. However, Kira knows herself too well and points out that the attendant does not give a damn what the Klingons or Cardassians think. Oh, the attendant croons, you know how to manipulate me. She agrees to go along with Kira's idea and calls for a guard to find her some quarters. The next day, Kira, who was essentially given free rein, visits the ore processing center to find enough filthy Bashir pushing a cart full of ore. Mirror Odo greets her at the door. Like his counterpart on their side, he prides himself in his efficiency. He offers assistance should she need him to explain anything, and when she demurs, saying that she has worked in ore processing before, he laughs out loud. When Kira mentions the name Kirk to Bashir, he immediately realizes where they are, having read about the transporter accident at the Academy. He plans to befriend the Mirror O'Brien in the hope that this Brine knows as much about transporters as theirs does. Meanwhile, Kira tries to find other help. Quarks is no different in the Mirror Universe aside from the clientele, with a mixed group of Bajorans and Cardassians standing around a Dabo table as Kira enters. Quark has started the crossover and remarks that Kira is indeed the spitting image of the attendant. However, he is surprised to find that Kira knows him. She claims that the two of them are close friends on her side and that her Quark does her a lot of favors. As her Klingon escort still observes them from the doorway, Kira nonchalantly mentions that her Quark gets things done for her that no one else can, and inquiries about a transporter. He is unaware of how the first crossover occurred and agrees to help her if she can show him how to send other people across. The Kira begins to talk about revolving doors. Garrick enters followed by 2 Klingons and yells Quark's name angrily. Greeting Garrick amicably, Quark attempts to act as if nothing is wrong. However, Garrick informs him that he is under arrest for helping Terrans escape from Terok Nor. Quark claims he is a coward who does not stick his neck out for anyone, but the Terran whom Garrick interrogated has said otherwise. Knowing what was about to happen, Quark pulls out a Cardassian phaser rifle and attempts to escape, only to be dragged away by the Klingons. "I shall miss him," Garrick observes. He always lets me win at Dabo. Shortly thereafter, Benjamin, Sisko, and a group of Terrans enter, helping themselves to free drinks in Quark's absence, and Kira sees another potential window of opportunity. Meanwhile, the exhausted Terrans are allowed a lunch break. Bashir seizes this opportunity to introduce himself to Amir O'Brien. Handing what little food he has been given to one of the other workers, he makes his way over to where O'Brien is fixing a panel of some sort. Hearing that the 2 of them are best friends in their universe piques this O'Brien's interest. He wonders what he does on the other side. Bashir informs him that he is chief of operations on the station, giving him reason to pause his work and consider the possibilities. When Bashir describes the other details of his O'Brien's life, Amir O'Brien says his other half must have gotten the lucky draw of the 2 of them. Bashir switches subjects, asking how much O'Brien knows about transporters. While he claims to be no expert, he adds that he knows as much as any Terran. "I hope that will be enough," Bashir remarks, explaining about the transporter plan. O'Brien finds this plan untenable and believes Bashir is lying to solicit his help. When Bashir insists that he is sincere, the spell that came over O'Brien when he heard of his other half seems broken, as he goes back to work and tells Bashir he does not know him. Odo interrupts to announce that break time is over and that Sisko has requested O'Brien's presence. O'Brien protests that he must finish his prepare work, but as usual, no one listens to him. Back in Quark's, Sisko and the other Terrans are enjoying themselves at the bar, and he remarks that the attendant called him away from the finalist system just to see Kira. She observes that he and his friends do not act like typical Terrans. As he explains, the attendant provides him with a ship in exchange for duties, of a sort, that he collects from other vessels. While most Terrans are enslaved, he and his crew allow relative freedom because he amuses the attendant. He observes that Kira must amuse her as well. O'Brien enters the bar to ask what Sisko wanted, and seeing him seems to brighten Sisko's day. Referring to O'Brien as Smiley, despite O'Brien's objection to the nickname, Sisko asks us being treated in an attempt to make small talk. He observes that Smiley does not like him, which O'Brien reluctantly confirms, evoking a laugh from Sisko. He says that the fact that Smiley is not afraid to show his dislike is why he amuses Sisko. Getting to the point, Sisko tells O'Brien that his impulse drive recoil needs to be repaired. O'Brien knows the problems in ore processing which he needs to fix first, but Sisko cannot be bothered with such things and orders him to fix the ship first. As the attendant calls for Sisko when he leaves the bar, Kira realizes that she may not have any hope at all. Kira enters the attendant's quarters to find the attendant in the bathtub with several Vulcan servants massaging and bathing her, as Sisko sits on a couch facing the door. The attendant wants to know if there is another Sisko on the other side, and on hearing there is, the idea of 2 Sisko pleases her. As she speaks, Sisko gets up to check on his ship, obviously not amused, but the attendant stops him to ask if she has hurt his feelings. Obediently, he replies, "I never had any to hurt," and exits. When Sisko is gone, the attendant talks to Kira as the Vulcans help her out of the tub and dress her. She mentions that she has heard Kira is looking for a transporter, and Kira reminds the attendant that she is looking for a way back home. However, had Kira come to the attendant with her request, she would know that transporters are redesigned after the first crossover to prevent future accidents. This leaves the attendant to wonder why Kira did not do so. As she approaches Kira, her voice betrays a combination of hurt and distrust. Kira reluctantly admits that she is afraid of the attendant. "I don't want your fear," the attendant confides as she comes face to face with Kira. "I want your love. If you can't love me, who can?" The door chime rings. Talal informs the attendant that Garrick has arrived with a prisoner. She tells them to come inside. They drag Quark, who has visibly been beaten, with them. As Quark apologizes for what he has done, the attendant kneels beside the Ferengi and comforts him, explaining that he helped the Terrans because he felt sorry for them. However, she reminds him that the Alliance needs the labor to process ore. For without the Terrans, nobody would perform such tasks. Rising to her feet, she tells Kira to give Quark a quick death and seems to all but forget about the incident as Quark is dragged away begging for mercy. Kira is aghast, but the attendant, now in happy mood, announces she plans to throw a party. "What shall we wear?" she asks her pet. Kira enters her quarters carrying a lavender dress to find Garrick waiting for her. "Lovely," says the Cardassian of the garment. "I do admire a well-tailored gown." I proceeds to explain the attendant will never let Kira return to our universe as she clearly is enamored with Kira. Describing how the attendant talks about Kira constantly, Garrick compares Kira to a Drotham puppy leg left on the attendant's doorstep, and hints at his true intentions as he makes a point of mentioning that the attendant trusts Kira with her life. Kira points at the guard outside her door as evidence of how much the attendant trusts her. But Garrick reveals that he arranged the guard, not the attendant. "Why will she trust you as much as she trusts anyone? So better to betray her," he suggests. Garrick explains that the attendant will be gone in the morning and Kira will take her place. Shortly thereafter, he explains that Kira will retire to Bajor and he will take her place, at which point he will become the attendant and Kira and Bashir will be sent home. He leaves Kira to ponder the idea and adds that, should she refuse, he has arranged for Bashir, rather than the attendant, to be gone. Hurriedly entering the ore processing center, Kira warns Bashir that the two of them must escape tonight. She does not have time to explain the web of lies and treachery, but she tells him to be careful because he might be in danger. Regardless of where they go from there, she insists that they must find a way to the runabout. She tells him that there will not be much warning if an opportunity presents itself, so he should be prepared. On the promenade, Kira finds Sisko half asleep, his eyes closed, leaning against a pillar. She claims to have valuable information that she is willing to trade. He finds amused in the idea that Kira has already gotten into business for herself. When she tells him she wants her runabout or way off the station, he laughs. "She'll have my head, or something else," he says of the attendant's reaction to such a plan. Kira dispenses with the negotiations and announces that Garrick is planning to kill the attendant. However, Garrick has been doing so since he first arrived on the station. She reveals the plot in hope that it will convince him she is serious, but he laughs and observes that the plan is more creative than Garrick normally gets. Frustrated, Kira wants to know why Sisko does not seem to care about the fact that he and his fellow Terrans are slaves. He counters by arguing that he has made the best of a bad life for himself. Disgusted, Kira accuses Sisko being no less a victim than anyone else, noting that of everyone she's been out of everyone she's met in this universe, the only person who had a shred of decency of all people was, of all people, Quark. As she leaves, her words seem to weigh heavily on his conscience. Kira attends the attendant's party in Quark's that night wearing the purple dress, and Garrick greets her charmingly. Dalek brags his fellow Klingons about his time in service as a Duras, commenting on the unpredictable nature of Lursa and Bador. One of Sisko's crew members accidentally bumps into him. He punches Terran dismissively, adding, "Stupid Terran pig." The Terran pulls out a knife and rises to his feet, but does so restrain anger as he knows he is not an equal. As seeing that the Terran is willing to challenge him, Dalek nods approvingly, ready for a fight. However, when Sisko shakes his head, the Terran puts the knife away. "What's wrong, Terran?" Dalek taunts. "Lost your nerve?" Dalek spits in the Terran's face, and the man almost loses control, but another shake of the head from Sisko prompts him to restrain himself. Visibly disgusted, Dalek orders the Terran to get out of his sight, and as the man does so, Sisko takes his place threateningly. However, the room shifts its attention as the attendant enters. The guest cheer as the attendant enters, followed by her Vulcan servants, and the musician asks what her pleasure is. She tells him to play something bright in a happy mood and joins the festivities as Kira observes her, deep in thought. Meanwhile, Bashir sits exhausted in ore processing in front of a pile of rocks. Odo approaches from behind and kicks him, noting that Bashir is unaccustomed to the workload, and as such has much to learn. "That's a shame this is going to be your last night on the job," he adds, with a hint of sadistic pleasure. His taunting is interrupted when, just as Brian warned, the thorium containment field on one of the machines short circuits. The Terran worker scatters out of context engineering. Bashir uses this opportunity to steal a phaser from the Bajoran deputies. Still facing deputy, he begins to back out the doorway, following the panic workers. Odo spots Bashir and reaches his own phaser, but Bashir shoots the changeling, causing him to explode and splattering goo everywhere. Not taking time to gawk, Bashir leaves immediately. Jalak and some of the other soldiers can be heard in the distance as Bashir runs around the corridors and enters the conduit. A pair of Klingons runs by, oblivious to his location. He crosses the shoreway before he finds O'Brien attending a panel on the wall. However, when he solicits O'Brien's help, O'Brien claims not to see him and goes about sealing the thorium leak. Bashir realizes it is futile and remarks that he thought O'Brien was a decent man, which O'Brien insists he is. O'Brien is worried that the Alliance will find and kill him if he helps Bashir. But Bashir points out that O'Brien, as well as every other Terran, is already dead. He begins to enter another conduit, but O'Brien points out that the runabout paths are through another conduit, asking if there is room on the ship for him. The two of them emerge in another corridor, only to find the Klingons have cut them off. Interrupting the party, Tulloch brings O'Brien and Bashir and informs the attendant of what has transpired. She immediately looks at Kira furiously. She declares that Odo's death is her fault for keeping Bashir alive in the first place and laments Odo's death. Garrick and the others observe closely as she proclaims that Garrick will use Bashir as his example and kill him slowly in public view for all Terrans to see. When Kira attempts to speak, the attendant threatens to have Kira join him. She then turns her attention back to O'Brien. As he has been a perfect worker for years, she wonders what got into him, and tells her that, hearing about life on the other side, and himself being chief of operations, made him realize that, whatever the other side is like, there has to be something better than life as a Terran. Not for you, Mr. O'Brien, the attendant informs him. Always going to be taking you with him, just like Psycho thought he would be taking you. With a nod from the attendant, Garrick begins to lead Bashir and O'Brien out of Quarks. But taking Garrick's gun from his holster, Sisko intervenes, inspired by O'Brien's words. The attendant does not believe what she sees and asks Sisko if he has lost his mind. He quietly replies, No, I didn't lose it. I just changed it. By this time, Kira and Sisko's crewmen have taken the queue and are all armed. They slowly exit the bar before Sisko shoots the panel above the door, locking it shut. As he does so, the attendant is near tears. For all the disparity between them, she had true feelings for Sisko. Kira warns Sisko as he escorts Bashir to the runabout pad that the attendant will track him down wherever he goes. Bashir suggests that he and his crew come with them, but Sisko assures them he can stay ahead of the law. Maybe we'll stir up some things on this side, he adds with a grin. On hearing this, O'Brien changes his mind about leaving and joins Sisko's crew. As Sisko says, he can always use a good tinkerer and putterer. Kira thanks Sisko before she and Bashir board the runabout. Disengaged with docking clamps, Bashir and Kira take the runabout straight to Impulse and depart Terra Nor as quickly as possible. As they head for the wormhole, Bashir reports that the runabout still has a plasma injector leak from the warp core, which Kira is counting on to return them home. They mimic the conditions of their original entry into the wormhole that brought them into the mirror universe, but Klingon cruiser heads straight toward them, trying to keep them from leaving early and nearly destroying the runabout. However, as the Klingons on this side know nothing of the wormhole, Bashir and Kira are able to maneuver toward it and enter. They are inside the wormhole when one of the runabout's systems short circuits and there is another brilliant flash of light. In opposite board, Deep Space Nine, Commander Sisko emerges from his office and asks if the crew has found anything. Odo stands next to Dax as she reports that a search vessel picked up traces of the runabout's warp signature and indications of a plasma leak, but no ship. There is an alert from the computer, and O'Brien announces it is them, although their deflector grid is damaged. Sisko tells Dax to hail the runabout, and with a mixture of annoyance and concern, asks where they've been. Through the looking glass, Kira responds. Yep, that's definitely one way to say it. So anyway, let's take a look at the background information with this episode, beginning with story and script. The original title crossover was to be Detour. Mike Pillar commented, quote, "We've been pitched Mirror Mirror sequels since Star Trek The Next Generation began, and I wasn't interested. But I couldn't get away from the fact that it would be interesting to know what happened after Mirror Mirror finished. I couldn't escape the idea that Kirk's influence in the world that he left might have been profound and changed history. What would be more of a gross violation of the Prime Directive? Ira Bear said, "What if we actually screw things up?" Spock listened to what he said, and then they turned this evil empire into a much more gentle empire that was conquered and taken over by the Klingons, the Cardassians, and others. I was watching Schindler's List, and I was thinking if I were a little older, I could have been in one of those camps in Poland. If Germany won the war, I would not be here doing what I'm doing today. I guarantee you. I was very pleased with the way the script turned out. Writer Robert Hewitt Wolfe wrote the fall of the Terran Empire and described as an analogy for the fall of the Roman Empire to the barbarians, and the Chinese dynasty to the Mongols. He also wanted to illustrate that if an empire is as brutal as the Terran Empire was in Mirror Mirror, there were probably reasons why it was so brutal, as he wished to convey the message that, in such circumstances, we cannot change things overnight, and even the action of Captain Kirk can have severe consequences. Quote, empires aren't usually brutal unless there's a reason. There are usually external and internal pressures that cause them to be that way. So I just thought that if the parallel Earth was that brutal, there had to be a reason. The reason was that the barbarians, the Klingons and the Cardassians, were at the gate. Wolfe elaborates on the political and historical metaphor contained in this episode when he says, quote, my analogy was to the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was as brutal and as nasty as it was because all around it had a very aggressive barbarians that it was afraid of. The Chinese had the same thing. The Mongols were always there. So if you suddenly make the Romans nice guys, or the Chinese nice guys, well, it's great and everything, but then the Mongols came across and it's all over. So that was kind of the idea. What was the Mirror Universe like 100 years after Mirror Mirror? Well, it might not be a very nice place. Worf was to appear in this episode, but Michael Dorn was unavailable as he was filming the series finale of Star Trek The Next Generation, All Good Things. His lines were given to Andrew Robinson, and the lines intended for Ellie McGarrick were used to create the character. When Dorn did appear in later Mirror Universe episodes, he played Regent Worf, leader of the Klingon-Cardassian alliance. And now onto the production of this episode. David Livingston commented on the filming of the episode that it was, quote, a killer. I don't usually call Michael Piller to comment on the scripts. When I read the draft, I just called him and said, cool, and hung up. It was not a pleasant experience for me because of all the pressure. It was just not fun. I wanted it to be a lot more than it is, but I'm glad to do it. It's one of the most expensive episodes we've ever done. We have 1% in makeup because the station is inhabited by Klingon, Cardassians, and Bajorans, and the humans are basically slaves, so they're wearing different costumes. We had swing sets that were huge, like the mining set, and very complicated to shoot. The shooting time was long because of the look and because of special effects, like smoke and steam and that kind of thing. Plus, we did make changes in the sets themselves, like quarks, and we replaced the big graphic in the bar with a symbol that represented the Bajorans, Klingons, and Cardassians melded together. The teaser scene in which two Klingons board the runabout is intentionally shot from extreme angles, which director David Livingston compared to essentially shooting up the actors' noses. He did this intentionally to empathize how different things were in the Mirror Universe. During the pre-production period of this episode, Livingston watched the 1949 Carol Reed movie The Third Man for inspiration, although he has admitted that he may have gone too far in using radically different angles. The knife wielded by the Terran when he is knocked over by T'Lok was designed by Rick Sternbach for an episode called The Beast, which became the basis for the episode Blood Oath, and it was originally intended to be wielded by a Klingon. That's interesting. And now on to some trivia surrounding this episode. This is the only Star Trek Deep Space Nine Mirror Universe episode in which the crossover is made via the Bajoran wormhole. All subsequent episodes show the crossover being made by way of a specially adapted transporter. The known for fearful symmetry posited this because the crossover in this episode was a deliberate attempt by the prophets to connect the two universes. In later Mirror Universe episodes, the Terran rebellion captured Tarek Nor from the Klingon-Cardassian alliance, which is what Sisko alludes to when he says he and his men will stir things up on this side. Kara Glofted does not appear in this episode. Later episodes will establish that Jake Sisko was never born in the Mirror Universe, making him the only character in the Star Trek universe known not to have a mirror counterpart. While Avery Brooks, Renee Auberjonois, and Colm Meaney all appear throughout the episode as their mirror counterparts, The regular characters of Benjamin Sisko, Odo, and Miles O'Brien only appear in the final scene. Terry Farrell only appears in the final scene. Quark does not appear in this episode, only his mirror counterpart. The mirror Odo's uniform sports a built-in color, which Auberjonois liked so much that he began using it in his regular series Odo uniform as well. Prior to the establishment of the history of the televised mirror universe, a mirror version of O'Brien appeared in the novel Dark Mirror, depicting a mirror universe in which the Terran Empire had survived well into the 21st century. That version of O'Brien served as a con officer aboard the ISS Enterprise from 2364 until at least 2367. According to novel Disavowed, Bashir steals a weapon used to kill Odo from the mirror universe counterpart of Sen Deska. The Deska of the Prime Universe is a long-running character in the novels. And now let's take a look at an award won by this episode. This episode was nominated for an ASC Award for Outstanding Achievement in Cinematography in Regular Series. That's kind of cool. So far, I think this is a pretty good episode, and yeah, it is nice to see what happened to the Terran universe after the events of Mirror Mirror, and let's just say it did not go over so well, so yeah. So overall, I gave the episode Crossover 5 Warp Course out of 5. Well, anyway, tune in a bit as we take a look at the next episode, The Collaborator. So, until then, live long and prosper, everybody.